All right, so let's start back at the beginning. We're going to recap as to where all this material comes from and where it's supported inside the law. All right, and we left off last time where we talked about this court case called United States versus Wong Kim Ark. Now, in in this case, just to build the foundation again, what happened was there was a young Chinese guy that was born in San Francisco, and his parents were born in China. He went to China in the late 1800s, and he was detained at the border, entering in San Francisco on one of the vessels. And then the United States charged him with a crime. He then appealed to the Ninth Circuit, and then took it up on cert to the Supreme Court of the United States in 1898. And they took the case, and they made a decision. And in that decision, you got you've got these Supreme Court justices that were all in favor of bringing this forward, except for two. And one of them was this dissenting judge. It's called the Great Dissenter, Justice Harlan. And we went through the case last time, kind of broke down what happened in this case, where it talks about bringing forward what was called the feudal system. Now, when I first heard this, I thought, this is crazy. There's no way. We're not living in a feudal system. This is nuts. There's no foundation for any of that. I mean, this is just not there, until I read this case, because we're all built into the common law, and under the common law, what they basically, how the courts are now just structured is that they're operating in what's called annotated code. And so anytime there's a holding case, the holdings inside the cases end up making the law, the common law. And it's basically that comes from an old case called Marbury versus Madison, where that's how the law was defined in America. So it's defined as what the courts tell us the law is, like it or not. That's what it is. And so in this case, the court's telling us what the law is. And we went through this a little bit more, and they're basically building the foundation of the fundamental principles of how they weren't able to find an actual common law case law, prior to 1898 under the 14th Amendment. So they decided to look back at the old English common law. And so these judges here are making the case to bring forward the old fundamental principle of the common law in regard to English nationality, which was birth within the allegiance, also called legality, obedience, faith, or power of the king. And so they're building the case for what it was like back in England and children born under England. Well, why the heck is that even relevant to us? We're not in England, Well, these judges here to this case are making the case that, well, we didn't have any case law to look back at, so we're going to bring forward the old English common law for the U.S. This new U.S. citizen, Wong Kim Ark. Let's bring it forward for him. So now the reason we really kind of know that is actually in the dissent. So we go way down to the dissenting opinion, which is going to be scroll it down. Okay. Every independent state. How far down are we till we get to Justice Harlan's? I just had it up, and it's hard to find sometimes. Give me just a moment. We're going to see it. Here we go. Chief Justice Fuller, who within concurred, Justice Harlan dissenting. I cannot concur in the opinion of the judgment of this course in this case. And then he's gonna start breaking down the fundamentals as to why. Okay, and he's gonna ask some very serious, poignant questions of the court here, which he's gonna break down the English common law, which was a rule insisted was enforced after so the English common law was a rule which was enforced after the Declaration of Independence, was that every person born within the dominions of the crown, no matter whether English or of a foreign parents, in a later case, whether the parents were settled mere temporary sojourners in the country, or was English, or it was an English subject. And they talk about, it goes through this tie to the crown. The rule was the outcome of the connection in feudalism. This is from the Supreme Court. This is the Justice Harlan's opinion that's saying this, not me. Again, this isn't legal advice. This is freaking what the court's saying. The rule was the outcome in connection with feudalism. So in pure and simple terms, which it asserted determined citizenship of the United States was during a period prior to the passage of the 1866 and the ratification of the 14th Amendment, and governed the meaning of the words citizen of the United States and natural born citizens. The 14th Amendment prescribed that same rules in act, and that the amendment bears the construction now put upon it. It imposed the English common law rule. You guys see it right there? So everybody can read it. I'm not making this up. Okay? Let's read it again. It imposed the 14th Amendment. It imposed the English common law rule on this country for the first time, making it absolute and unbending. All right? There it is. That's the law. So we all know that it's not, Rick Schramm and all these people were all looking for this. Everybody for 30, 40 years had been looking for, ever since the 14th Amendment, what had happened? Like, why did the U.S. citizen have no rights? Why did this U.S. citizen get treated like garbage in the courtroom? Why did they get treated like property? And then it wasn't until we found this case. This is the case that shows us what happened. All right. Lawful, and where they're now there's an exception here where if they were bastards, okay, and they couldn't recognize their mother, there could be a potential that they were actually nationals. And this is an interesting exception, because where you look at the slaughterhouse cases, which is also in this case, and in the slaughterhouse cases, they were white nationals, meaning white butchers in Louisiana, and those butchers were trying to come in under the 14th Amendment to sue for their own, sue for their rights under 14th Amendment citizenship. But the court didn't have jurisdiction because these guys were actually nationals. And this is an example here where they are bastards, that their mother was, and they were not, certain who the father was, because the father could be a national. Therefore, they'd have those rights, So it really, meaning national, this is the time of the old state citizen. Now, let's go down a little further, see if there's any. So it is beyond dispute that the most vital constituent of the English common law rule has always been rejected in respect to citizenship of the United States. So he's making the point here that this feudal system has, flat out been rejected here. Again, this is the dissenting opinion. The court's already made a determination that it's coming forward. The feudal system is here. But he's saying here that it has always been rejected in this country, but beyond a reasonable doubt. People have never wanted that here. Under the Constitution, every free person born in the soil of state who is a citizen of the state by force of its constitutional laws is also a citizen of the United States. Talking about Dred Scott. And then here he goes through the allegiance of children so born in is not the local allegiance arising from their parents merely being domiciled in the country. It's a single and not double allegiance. Indeed, the double allegiance is the sense of double nationality has no place in our law, and the existence of a man without a country is not recognized. So that would be about for someone who has an allegiance to a foreign country, not one of the 50 states, but a foreign country like China in this case, because remember, it's about a Chinese citizen. So what do we mean subject by the jurisdiction of the state? And then he goes through here, the 14th Amendment, which came from the slaughterhouse decisions. We talked about that, about how the butchers all sued for rights after they built the state-owned slaughterhouse. So everybody with the cows are being thrown into the Mississippi River and dirtying it up. So they passed this law in Louisiana and to bring forward this law where everybody had to come to the slaughterhouse of the state. They appealed to the United States. The United States said, we don't have any jurisdiction on this because you guys are state citizens, basically. You're nationals. You're white. The phrase subject to the jurisdiction of it was intended to exclude from its operation children of ministers, consuls, citizens, and subjects of the foreign states born within the United States. So talking about these people are not all people are subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. Not all people. This is under Justice Miller's, who's delivering the opinion of the court. And they observed this. So then by the 13th Amendment, slavery was prohibited, but the main object upon the opening sentence of the 14th Amendment was to settle this question. Naturalized in the United States and owing no allegiance to any alien power should be citizens of the United States and of the state which they reside. Slaughterhouse cases. So to be completely subject to the political jurisdiction of the United States is to be in no respect or degree subject to the political jurisdiction of any other government. And then lastly, these considerations lead to the conclusion that the rule and respect of citizenship of the United States prior to the 14th Amendment differed from the English common law rule and values, and among others, that it did not recognize allegiance as indelible. What is that word? Indelible? Help me out with that word, guys. What is that word? Indelible? Sure what that means. Indelible. Indelible.
It's impossible to wash away, erase, get rid of.
Okay. There we go. Impossible. That makes sense. So, as
making a mark not easily erased or washed away, unable to be forgotten, memorable.
Perfect. So that makes sense. So as with that in mind, of indelible is impossible to erase, impossible to get away from. So it's stating here that prior to the 14th Amendment, allegiance, this country did not recognize allegiance to the United States as indelible. Okay. Meaning that allegiance for protection for allegiance under the United States, the allegiance to the federal corporation. Now, but in this case here, the question here to the court, look at this question at the end. This is the final hammer, the nail in the coffin of this whole dissenting opinion. Did the 14th Amendment impose the original English common law rule as a rigid rule on this country? Question mark. That is a rhetorical question within the dissenting opinion, meaning that yes, he's pled this whole case that it did. It obviously did, and he's raising this in a rhetorical question as a snide, very blow to the court. Like, how dare you bring forward this old English common law rule on our country, this feudal system under the 14th Amendment citizen? How dare you do that? And that's our law. That's what we get to deal with now today. So when you really get into the Wong Kim decision, it's the foundation for citizenship. It's the most important case that we have on our backs today as to why the U.S. citizen is subject to the federal corporation, and why the U.S. citizen is nothing more than a subject, nothing more than a serf, a modern day slave. And it really comes down to two questions. Are you a U.S. citizen? Are you a resident? So every time that we've been asked those questions in our life, we've probably answered yes and had to sign something afterwards. And it happens all the time. I mean, I was dealing with a police situation a couple months back, and they wanted to find out if I was a resident or I'm a resident. That was their big hang up. And I give them my passport card, and they're like, "But are you a resident? Are you a resident?" That gives them jurisdiction. What does resident even mean? It's this fancy legal word that sounds like I live somewhere, but it's this confusing legal term that has multiple meanings, and it's a jurisdictional legal minefield. Those two words, resident and U.S. citizen. So the dissent there in the Wong Kim opinion there will hopefully I challenge anybody to get into that and read through it and tell me where I'm wrong, because I don't know everything. Where am I wrong in my interpretation on that? I would say it would be hard to to say otherwise, because you know, this has been brought through a lot of legal scholars, and it's clear that we are under the feudal system, under the 14th Amendment with the U.S. citizen. But the good news is, the feudal system gives you the option of volunteering for it and volunteering out, because that was the whole point of that 14th Amendment. Was 13th and 14th Amendment was to get rid of slavery, that was in involuntary slavery, and bring in voluntary slavery. That's the point. They wanted to make sure that they got rid of the involuntary slavery, but they brought forward the voluntary slavery, you know. So now that we know that, we get the option of volunteering out. And so stay tuned for the next video and watching on more on how to do that. All right, we'll see you guys at the top.